If your solos sound like you are just running up and down scales, what you are missing is intervallic leaps. In this video I'm going to show you how to take one scale and turn it into infinite melodic ideas by using intervallic leaps. Let's get into it. When you're improvising as a guitar player, if you are playing over backing tracks or playing with your band, whatever context you're in, you're always going to be coming up against basically 6 main chord types. What we want to do is ascertain what your primary scale is you can draw from for each one of those 6 chord types. So what we're going to do is look at that right now. First and foremost, you have 3 static chord families, which would be major 7th type chords, dominant 7th type chords, and minor 7th type chords. Now, if you want to read through the information that I've put up on the screen here, pause the video and take a good look at all of this. But what I'm going to do is just give you a very, very quick breakdown. So when you are coming across major 7 chord types, your primary scale wants to be the Lydian mode, okay? So most people would say that you would use the major scale. The problem with the major scale is the 4th degree that's in there gives us a bit of a clash. So what I want to do is I want to put on an A major 7 backing track so that you can hear the Lydian mode against that. Sounds like this. With the Lydian is the sharp 4th interval that's in there gives us a rather dreamy kind of sound. So major 7, look at using Lydian. Next up, let's talk about dominant 7th chords. Now they sound like this. They have a very bluesy, rock ready kind of sound, and the primary scale choice that we're going to go for over this is the Mixolydian mode, okay? The intervallic formula for that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. Let's have a listen to this in context over a dominant 7th chord. Okay, and the last static chord that you'll probably come across is the minor 7. Sounds like this. Okay, now a lot of people would say that you can play the natural minor scale against this, but the note that's a little bit difficult against this chord is that flat 6, where what we're going to plump for is the Dorian mode, which is intervallic formula of 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, major 6, flat 7. This is, as it says on the screen, a staple for minor key rock and blues progressions, and you'll find anyone from Joe Satriani to Slash to Santana to all your favourite jazz players and anyone really using this scale. Against the minor 7th chord, it sounds like this. So they are your 3 static chords that you're going to come across a lot. So when you're looking around for backing tracks on YouTube, most often you'll find minor 7 or dominant 7 vamps. If you're finding backing tracks that have got changes in them, they will introduce some tension so that your chord progression is being pushed along. So let's look at the 3 tension chords that you're going to come across. So what we're looking at here are functional chord families. So in rock and modern lead playing, functional chords add tension, movement and resolution to your chord progressions, okay? The first one that we're going to talk about is the minor 7 flat 5 chord, okay? So minor 7 flat 5 chord sounds like this. It's quite an ugly chord on its own, but what you'll tend to find if we was playing a 2-5-1, which is a common jazz chord progression in the key of A, you'd have something like B minor 7 flat 5, going to E7, and then going to an A minor 7. Now, generally speaking, over a minor 7 flat 5, you want to look at using the Locrian mode. You could also play an alternative scale called the Locrian Natural 2, which is also known as Aeolian flat 5, which is a mode of melodic minor. Personally, I just use Locrian. So let's listen to what Locrian sounds like against a minor 7 flat 5 chord. that's a pretty intense, dark, difficult sound to listen to, but when you're playing that in context over a chord progression in the backing tracks that you're playing over, it can be really effective, so don't overlook it. And the next one we're going to talk about is the altered dominant chord. Now what that means is a dominant 7th chord that can have either a flat 9 or a sharp 9, a flat 5 or a sharp 5, or any combinations of the above. The dominant chords are basically there to introduce tension to the music, which makes them ideal for lead-ins, turnarounds, blues, rock, jazz and fusion. They're really, really cool chords, and generally speaking, the go-to scale that you want to be looking at for this is the Superlocrian, which is the 7th mode of the melodic minor scale. Other really good alternatives for this could be the half-whole diminished and Phrygian dominant from harmonic minor. What I'm going to do is put on an A7 altered chord and play Superlocrian over it so you can hear that in context. Again, that has a very dark, brooding, unresolved quality in that context, but what we've got to do is remember that we're going to be resolving from something like A altered up to a D minor 7, which gives you tension and release against your backing track. The final chord that we want to talk about here is the diminished 7th chord. Now that is basically the same thing as a dominant 7 flat 9. For example, if I was to play E flat diminished 7, it looks and sounds like this. If I invert that so that the B flat is actually at the top here, this is the same chord as A7 flat 9. So these function one of two different ways. You can see them as a diminished 7th chord, or you can see it a semitone below as an altered dominant as a dominant 7 flat 9. Now the go-to scale that you would use against these would be diminished half whole, which sounds like this. Once you've established which scale you're going to go for against the chord that you're playing against, what we now want to look at is how you're going to extract intervallic passages from within this to create melodic lines. What we're talking about here in this video is just one part of the overall soloing strategy that combines fretboard knowledge, technique and musicality all into one. It's very difficult to play your ideas if you don't know where they are on the fretboard. It's also difficult to play ideas when your technique isn't up to scratch. And then finally, you want to be looking at turning these things into licks, lines and vocabulary. If you want to get my full training that puts all of that together into one unique video and then has a PDF guide that takes you through all the tabs and the exercises you need, it's all available completely for free at the link in the description, or if you're watching this on TV, if you scan the QR code, you'll be able to get access to that immediately. Now, the full method that we're looking at here is something that I call the scale pyramid. Now, how this works: you take one of those 6 chords that you're going to find in Western harmony and you establish a bass scale or mode that fits over that chord. Now what we've just done is been through and figured out which scales and modes we're going to use with each one of the chords. Now by having a primary scale that you're going to target over a specific chord, what you've done is you've massively narrowed down your options of thinking about what you're going to play. So if you know where that scale lives all over the fretboard, the notes just light up for you and you can see what you're going to go for. What you should then establish is a series of licks, lines and runs that you can play using that scale. The thing is, where the scale pyramid comes in to make things much more exciting is that by using a extraction method, we've got a scale or mode that has 7 notes in it, okay? What we're then going to be able to do is, if you take off one of those notes, when you're only left with 6 note options, you have a whole bunch of hexatonic scales that are available to you. If you then take away the note density down to 5 notes, you have pentatonic notes available to you, and most people watching this video will understand what a pentatonic type scale is. If we then target 4 note options, we'll be looking at arpeggios, 3 note options, triads, and then the main point of the video we're going to talk about here is if you're targeting 2 different notes at a time, you'll be looking at playing intervallic leaps. Now, an interval itself is just the distance between 2 notes. So if I'm playing an A, as we were in the key of A a minute ago, if I play a major second relative to that A, then note is a B, and it's just the intervallic distance of A to B is what we call a second. You've then got A to C sharp, which would be a third. A to D would be a fourth. A to E is a fifth. A to F sharp is a sixth. A to G sharp is a seventh. And then A to A is your octave. So these are the intervals that you'll find in one octave of a major scale. You can also alter a lot of these intervals. So you can have a flat second, that's your Jaws interval. Flat 3, otherwise known as a minor third. You can flatten your 4, but that's the same thing as a major third. You can flatten your 5. That diminished fifth that has been made famous by bands like Black Sabbath. You can have a flat 6, which is a very sad sounding interval, and a flat 7, which is really bluesy. Now, from any note that you are playing within a scale, you can play other notes against it. The distance between these two notes is an interval. So now what we want to look at is taking a scale over a given chord and start extracting intervallic ideas from it. What we're going to do now is go through all of these various different intervallic leaps that you can play from seconds to thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, sevenths and octaves, and start showing you a few ideas. So in this example that you've got on the screen here, the first two bars are being played over an F major 7, a Lydian sound, and that comes out like this. But the two bars after show you a run over an E altered chord. Now what we're going to be using is E superlocrian. And what I'm going to do is extract intervallic leaps of seconds. Now, when you're thinking about playing seconds, generally speaking, that's stepping through a scale. Okay, so from any note that I'm playing, if I go up to the next step in the scale, that's an intervallic leap of a second. But you can make these more exciting by playing them backwards, as I'm playing here. That's a common idea that you would hear people like Yngwie Malmsteen use, but also Alan Holdsworth used to use ideas like this as well. As I say, if you're going to play steps through scales, what you want to do is make them sound like you're not stepping through the scale. Obviously, one of the things that makes this idea sound a bit more exciting anyway is because I've got chord changes. So I'm going from an F major 7 to an E altered, which will eventually resolve to an A minor. Let's hear this second lines in context against the backing track. Okay, so in this next idea we're going to be looking at making intervallic leaps of thirds. Okay, so over the chord that we're playing over here is an A minor 7, and I'm going to be looking at using the A Dorian mode. So the initial lick comes out as this. So our first little bit of leaps, 5, 8, B7. If I play these in a straight line, you can see that instead of going stepping through the scale, what I'm doing is I'm playing every other note. Now in this particular case, what this makes is an E minor triad. Because of course triads and arpeggios are made from stacking thirds. Now here I'm setting myself up with a bit of A minor pentatonic, but then what I'm going to do is descend through a series of consistent intervallic leaps of thirds. Now that basically gives me the sound of a D7 arpeggio. But then I'm going to start another series of thirds going down from the 12th fret here on my G string, my G note. Which is kind of setting up the sound of F sharp minor 7 flat 5. But I'm doing that over A minor 7. Then again, thirds creeping up. The fretboard up to this bend at the 15th fret on the B string. So when you're looking at thirds, is that instead of stepping straight through your scale, what you're doing is playing every other note. So instead of straight through, play every other note like this. Let's check out this example against the backing track. Okay, let's talk about a fourths example. So when you're looking at fourths, fourths has a very fusiony and angular kind of sound to them. So what we're looking at doing here is playing fourths over G Dorian. So we've got a G minor 7 chord in the background, and we're going to go down. So basically I'm starting on the minor third of G Dorian, and I'm moving down fourths along the length of a string. So all of these intervallic leaps and jumps that you're looking at don't have to happen vertically, they can happen horizontally as well. So that's the start of this line. And then when you see at the 13th fret here, I'm going to start going. So this is what happens quite often with fourths, is that you're playing the note below on the adjacent string, which makes them quite hard to execute on the guitar, which is one of the reasons why we like to play them in a straight line if we possibly can. Sometimes we need to use sweep picking, but one of the things that is very, very difficult is the rolling. Trying to keep it clean by going across to that adjacent string. Now in this particular line, what I've done with the triplets that you see here in bar 15, bar 16, is after playing the fourths, I've then butted that up to an idea in seconds stepping through the scale, because one of the things is if you just play one type of interval all the time, it can get a bit weird in terms of its sound. So you want to jumble these up a little bit. Now once I've gone down in the seconds, I'm then coming up to the 10th fret over here, and again I'm going to be looking at playing fourths in a line on a single string, but what I'm doing is I'm adding string skipping. Now what that creates is a 3/4 rhythmic feel, which is obviously rhythmically a bit more interesting, but also as well from a harmonic perspective, it means that instead of having to use sweep picking, I can use legato, which is obviously a more common guitar technique. Let's take a listen to this against the backing track. With these various intervallic approaches is what you've got to look at is also your technical application and being able to see these aligned to the correct scale and where they would live on the fretboard. Again, this is what I teach in my full system over at Cutting Edge Guitar, where you can get the entire training video and the PDF download that comes along with that to take you through the whole thing. So you need to go to the link in the description to be able to get hold of that, or scan the QR code that you see on your screen right now if you're watching this on a TV, and you'll be able to get instant access. Okay, so let's start talking about some fifths. Now, one of the things that I've done in this particular line here is I'm taking a motif down through the scale that we're playing over in fifths. Okay, now what we're actually playing over, this is still over a G minor 7. So we're targeting notes from G Dorian. And as I say, in this line, this initial motif is being moved down a fifth every time in the scale. Now the exits there. You've got intervallic leaps and jumps of fifths, but one of the things that I want to get across to you here is that you don't always just have to play purely the interval. You can take an idea and move that in intervallic leaps. So you could take a motif and move it in fourths, or a motif and move it in octaves, or something like that. So after I've taken this down through the scale, the next idea that I'm going to play here is play literal intervallic leaps of fifths from the 5th fret on the D string, and I'm going to step this all the way through the scale. Up to that ultimate exit at the 20th fret on the high E string. Now, one of the ways that you want to look at fifths like this is it's basically playing power chords, root fifth. Anyone who knows a bit of theory is that a root and a fifth is what we create power chords with. Or if I take that down an octave. Okay, so you're familiar with that as a rock guitar player, but we're playing these broken up. So let's take a listen to this line in context against the track. Sixth has a very sweet country-ified sound, but how I'm going to be using them here is in a sort of modern rock fusion-y kind of context. In the line in the context that I have on the screen right now, this is a chromatic run that starts in A Dorian, and I'm going to sort of set up a enclosure. An enclosure is when you play notes above and below a note to then basically target the note. I want to land on the minor third of our G minor. And here, approaching bar 13, we're taking sixths through the scale. And now, of course, moving on from this, we don't have to just play things like sixths vertically. Here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take sixths all along the length of the B in the high E string. And then again, I'm going to start moving them vertically once I've reached this position on the neck. So a great way to create balance with all of these intervallic leaps that we're talking about is to have ideas that work for you vertically and horizontally. Let's check this one out against the track. To sevenths. Sevenths are a very difficult interval for guitar players to look at because of the sheer size of the leap. Okay, so many solos that you would come across don't feature sevenths at all, but what I've put in this line here is a couple of different ways that you can see how you could start executing them. And what I've done is I've taken them laterally along the guitar. So I've butted this up to a more sort of standard scalar way of playing. But what this also has in there is triads. So this is a big part of the overall system that I call the scale pyramid. Again, if you want to get hold of all of that stuff, go to the links in the description where I'll take you through the full method absolutely free. Okay, moving on from the scalar run then, we then have more leaps of sevenths here at the 12th fret. And then moving up to 14, 16, 17. Let's check this one out against the backing track. talk about octaves. Now, octaves are something that most guitar players will be fairly familiar with because they get used in rhythm guitar a lot. So whether you're coming from a jazz background and you like people like Wes Montgomery, or you're looking at an entirely different style like nu metal guitar players have used octaves for years in order to get a particular sound. So have punk guitar players. So we're more used to the sound of octaves, but using them as a lead guitar tool, again, can be quite difficult because we tend to stick to playing things like this. Which is like a modern rock version of the old school Wes Montgomery way of using them. But what I'm going to do in this example here is I'm going to show you a way that you can extract octaves using the half-whole diminished scale, which is one of the scales that we talked about earlier on. So in the backing, I have an altered dominant chord, and I'm going to be using that scale over an E7 sharp 9, E7 flat 9. So I'm going to be using half-whole diminished to set up that altered scale. Now what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to extract octaves moving in minor thirds. So I'm going to play an octave from an F, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move them down in minor thirds. Anything that you do within the diminished scale can be moved in minor thirds or flat fives. So this line comes out like this. Let's take a listen to this in context over the track. So by looking at all of these different intervallic leaps over various different chords, you can see how by creating a single scale that you can use over a particular chord and then breaking it up into lots of intervallic passages can give you almost infinite scope for melodic ideas. In order to really get the best out of this subject, what you need to be able to do is see where all of these musical devices live on your fretboard. So getting your fretboard knowledge down and having a good enough technical facility to be able to execute the ideas that you want to come up with and the sounds you hear in your head. Finally, the ability to be able to turn all of that into musical vocabulary. Now, this is what I show in my full training that you can get over at Cutting Edge Guitar completely for free by going to the link in the description, or if you're watching this on a TV, scan the QR code that you see on the screen in front of you right now. I hope you've enjoyed the video and it's been useful. Give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you get more lessons like this as and when I do them, and I'll look forward to seeing you in your next lesson. Take care.